Okay, we have two very special guests today. We have Caden and Rylan Butera. They're brothers. I met them both in high school. They shoot film and they're awesome at it. So could the two of you kind of give a brief overview of what you do and your projects and whatnot?
Absolutely. Thanks for having us, Greg. So I'm Caden. I am a director. My primary role is director and then a screenwriter. And then my brother over there,
Are you going
I'll
to
lead him
introduce
in.
for me? Okay.
No.
Hello, I'm Rylan. Thank you, Greg, for having us. I am a film composer and then also a creative collaborator with my brother. So we write the stories together. And then, as he said, he's a screenwriter and directs the stuff. So he does most of the magic, but I do the musical magic.
Wow. So wait, so do you do special effects like the sounds, or do you just like make the music for like what kind of music? Like what are you talking about?
Right. So score is ever changing. And more we're seeing how like sound effects is becoming part of the score, which is really cool. So like Hans Zimmer is always like mixing instruments with like sounds, and it's really unique.
Okay.
So I'm trying to do that too when the story demands it, but mostly I'm using just instrumental works with usually like orchestral templates. So strings, brass, woodwinds, lots of percussion, those types of things.
And do you do all this on your computer, or do you do some recording with some actual instruments?
Right. So the dream is always to record with real musicians, but that is rather expensive to get a full orchestra on board. So I work through what's called a digital audio workstation, which is like a garage band. And so I will use artificial instruments that sound pretty legitimate. And I can get like the sound and weight of a full orchestra, which is really cool. And it's, it doesn't sound always like 100% legit, but you can get pretty close. And that's what I work with.
Okay. And then Caden, how do you work with the sounds that Rylan makes? Do you kind of just let him put it wherever, or do you kind of, I
Right.
guess, direct them in the right direction?
Yeah. So giving a kind of an initial disclaimer, Ryland and I both are working in the indie film world right now. So neither of us are necessarily like in Hollywood, living the dream, getting hired by
Yes.
Warner Bros. To make movies. We do, I'd like to think, work on some legitimate projects, but we're still, new at this game and learning. I mean, I've been making movies since I was 8 years old, but as far as in the professional world, it's still pretty new for me. So Round and I have a process which is, I'd like to think pretty good and semi-standard, but everyone has a different one. And the bigger up in the industry you go, the different it is sometimes. So for Round and I's relationship, because we're brothers, I can be actually a lot more informal than I would if, say, I was working with another composer, which I have in the past. Round, of course, is my go-to. I'm a little biased, but I think he's great. But to answer your question, the process is basically it starts with a spotting session where we sit down and we watch the movie, and talk about where we even want music to go, because sometimes the best music is no music, and in the case of Round, who's just garbage most of the time, that's the best option.
True.
Just kidding. But we talk about where the music is going to go, and I, of course, I'm going to have some thoughts. Round is going to have some thoughts, and then after we decide on where we want music to go next, we're going to talk about basically the intention behind the scene. It would be less helpful for me. Of course, I still accidentally do it anyway, but to give Round very specific, horn should start here, followed by drums. I'd be doing his job for him. I want to lean into the expertise of others. That's kind of the main role of the director. And so I give Rylan the intention behind this scene. I want to be feeling sympathy for this character. I want to be feeling happy. I want to be laughing with this character. I want this to be, start with an emotion, and then I can get a little more specific sometimes, but give kind of that overview and then let Rylan take it and then see where he goes with it. And it's a bit of a back and forth. It's a collaboration, but at the end of the day, we land on some music magic, hopefully, and make the scene better.
So Rylan kind of sets the mood.
That is a good way of putting it.
Oh.
Yes, he sets the mood all right. I know some people who would agree with that one. But yes, yeah, it is Rylan's job. Sometimes his job is invisible, but it is to consciously or subconsciously let the audience in on how they should be feeling. Of course, you don't want to be screaming how a person should be feeling in the face of the audience, because they'll feel insulted oftentimes, unless it's a comedy. But to subtly, consciously or subconsciously imply how this moment should be making you feel.
Yeah, or kind of suggesting. It's kind of like an unconscious suggestion in a sense.
Exactly.
Right.
Yes, we can only suggest, like, you can lead a horse to water. Of course, you can't make them feel sad just because he wrote this beautiful violin solo. It's a combination of things, but yeah, it's a suggestion.
So what kind of genres have you worked with? I know you did that sort of sci-fi. I haven't seen any of it, but it's this, I forget what it's called. It was this sci-fi thing that you did with, they're all like wearing like these robot suits and they have these guns and stuff. What was that called?
Yeah, I think the one you're talking about is called Recursion. That one was a sci-fi short film we shot. I want to say 3 years ago now, but it was just picked up by the channel Dust. They're a sci-fi channel. Awesome. They have a website and a YouTube, and they acquired that short from us, and it's on their platform. You can watch it now. Shameless plug. It's called Recursion, and that one we shot in an abandoned sawmill.
Wow.
In Old Town, Idaho. Basically came in to this abandoned sawmill and put some actors in some spacesuits and had them walk around and called it a day. I'm simplifying things, but it was a really fun project. So sci-fi I've done a lot of. I love sci-fi. Huge nerd for sure. So sci-fi, action, comedy. I typically like my genres mixed, so I'm never doing necessarily like a straight up drama, but if it's like an action drama, I'm all for it. Or if it's a sci-fi thriller, or if it's a zombie Western movie. That was the last big project we worked on, was a genre mash of Western and zombie, which is the big project Rylan is scoring for right now.
That's
so I try
really
to
cool.
bounce. Yeah, I'd like to think so. It gets me excited whenever I talk about it. But
have you played Red Dead Redemption before?
As a matter of fact, I have played Red Dead Redemption. Red Dead Redemption 2, I played so much of, and it may or may not have been a big inspiration for the project.
Okay.
I haven't played the game, but there's no zombies in Red Dead though.
There is. There's a pack that you can get. And it's like undead, or like red undead, or
yes,
that was for Redemption.
I haven't played it, but yeah, there is for Red Dead Redemption 1, which I haven't played. There is like a expansion with zombies in it, which looks like a lot of fun. I haven't played it yet though.
It's really cool.
Yeah, I need to get on that. But basically, to answer your question, I bounce around all the genres. Jumping around genres is a lot of fun because I get bored easily,
Yeah, that makes sense. So when you're writing a movie, do you kind of have, like, obviously you have the story in line first, at least that's my assumption. Then is there a message that kind of comes after the fact, or do you kind of put in a message ever?
Right. That's a good question. I mean, so the main thing that I look for in a good story is a good theme. And every person has a different, like, which came first, the chicken or the egg. Some people come up with the theme first. Some people come up with the story. I know, like, some of the best directors in the world, like Quentin Tarantino, he comes up with it after. At least that's what he says. And then there's other people who right from the get-go they have a theme they want to explore, and then they shape and craft the story around it. I kind of am, I feel like a mix. Where definitely like a story concept starts in my head first, but before I just start going down the rabbit hole, I kind of want to entertain the idea of, if this is going to go somewhere, what is it really going to be about? Talking about the theme. And if I can actually have an answer right away, I'm like, okay, this might be a story worth telling. And from that, I try to build the story concept and the theme hand in hand, because I think it needs to be a healthy marriage of the two. And my least favorite movies oftentimes are movies that have nothing to say at all.
Yeah. I mean, I don't really like the Transformers movies because
yeah. I mean, Transformers 1 though, yeah, goes pretty hard, I gotta say.
No, I 100% agree. But
Yeah. It depends on the movie.
yes.
But I think that people, there's a kind of misconception in both the entertainment industry and just normal audience members, that if a movie is a certain genre, it can't have a compelling theme. Like, I think right off the bat, when people think like movies that matter, they go to like the hard hitting dramas, right?
Yes.
If your movie is not about like a crippled alcoholic going to win the Olympics, then like, is your movie really a movie? And I think like a lot of these like, I'll just take Guardians of the Galaxy, for example. That's a big action Marvel movie. It's a superhero movie, right? How could that movie have something important to say? But in my opinion, it still does. The package is a really fun comedy action romp, but I think that movie has a beautiful theme. You know, I take that as a big challenge to write. Round and I both really like action movies, but we also like action movies that have something to say.
Same here.
Yeah. But I forgot what the question was, but somewhere in that ramble, that was the answer you were looking for, right?
Yes. I mean, I was just asking how you come up with a theme, and whether or not you come up with a theme before or after writing the story. When I write a story, I come up with the story first, and then I can kind of see the theme in the story in a sense.
Yeah.
Like the theme already exists within the story that I made, if that makes any sense.
No, absolutely. Yeah, no,
Then
they
you
have
can
to
evolve.
Go hand in hand.
You can evolve that as well.
Right. No, 100%. And so I guess that's my rough answer. Rylan, did you have a thought on that?
Yeah, no, I think that you all are pretty much saying exactly how I feel. Just like the actual story itself is in like the external parts of the story, like those conflicts that happen. Like if you're to defeat a bad guy, let's just to say, it's just like the theme needs to be embedded, because like whatever bad guy you're defeating is likely some sort of representation of like your internal conflict that you need to defeat. So like when you're coming up with the story, I feel like it is pretty embedded in an understanding of what like the theme needs to be. And so just yeah, that's how I feel. Like when I know at the very end of the film we need to defeat this guy, why you need to defeat that guy is because of probably the theme that your characters are going through. So I think that they just tell each other what needs to go where, for sure.
So Rylan, with that thought, do you think you or your brother are ever projecting your own internal struggles onto the screen?
Absolutely. I That's a very good question. It's a very personal question too. But yeah, I mean, the stories that we want to tell, hopefully, are the stories, you know, that mean the most to us.
Yeah.
Like, and so I know we're currently working on a feature film, and kind of the general theme is about basically not denying bad things that happen, but learning from the mistakes that you made, and like learning yeah, how to overcome struggles and grief. And like I feel like that's a very pervasive thing for everyone, but definitely something that I've experienced. And so it's a story that I care a lot about, and I think that's how it should be. You know, I feel like people who are in the art of creating art, is always, whenever you're creating some sort of art, like, you need to be invested. If you're not fully into it, if you're not fully passionate about it, it doesn't mean something to you, then I don't think that you're going to make something as great as it could be. So
I 100% agree with you. Because I mean, sometimes my heart's not all the way in it, and if I try to force it, it just turns out bad. Because I think sometimes, I mean, sure, it's important to meet a deadline. However, if you meet that deadline by going against your passions and kind of putting in work when you shouldn't be putting in work, and like when your mind is kind of brain dead in a sense and you're just not feeling it, I think you can really produce a product that's not very good.
yeah,
But of course,
Right.
you still need to meet a deadline, right? You still need to get stuff done, but I think it's important to find that balance.
Right. No, I
Yeah.
agree. I mean, especially in a industry that is about creating art, but also people need to get paid. It's finding that
Yes.
balance of the people who are there, yes, for the paycheck, but also are there because their heart is in it and they are passionate about what they're doing.
right.
Those are the people that are the most fun to work with too. If you're on set and you can tell that people are just there to get the paycheck, they're they don't have the enthusiasm that someone who would be there working for like half the pay and jolly to do it would have. Not that there's anything wrong with making money, and there's a whole other argument to be had about abusing artists and not paying them enough.
Yeah.
But finding the person who loves their job and has that passion for the project, and of course hopefully you pay them really well too. Those are the people who are making really good things and having fun doing it.
Yeah, I completely agree. I was gonna say, like, I feel like that's just true. That's the mindset that you need to have, I think, as an artist. Sounds so pretentious when I say it like that. But like, for all artists, whether you're writing a novel or like trying to make it into the industry of film or a musician, like, those things, they don't pay well unless, like, by the small chance you actually like make it big and like become
Exactly.
like a huge star. And so, like, it can be super easy to get discouraged, but like, the reason why I'm trying to chase this dream and being able to share, what I love to so many people, is because it's what I'm passionate about. And like,
Yes.
if you're not passionate about trying to be like a composer or something like that, then like, I don't think you'll make it. You got to put your heart into it.
I think if you even get discouraged, you shouldn't even be doing it.
Oh,
Really?
Well, I mean, think of it this way. If you love it, you're never going to be discouraged because you're going to keep doing it anyways.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely, I'm going to partially disagree with you on that. I think that like discouragement in a lot
Definitely
of
grain of
ways.
salt.
Yeah, it's part of the ride discouragement, but it's the people who fall off the horse but then get back on
yeah,
versus just
overcome the
give up on
discouragement.
horse riding altogether. Yeah, I mean, I think discouragement is natural for a lot of people in the creative process, but it's the people who just like the moment it gets hard, they don't want to deal with it. I 100% agree because that's part for the course. That's
Yes.
the process, is failing over and over and over again but getting back up. And the people who are just like, I don't want to deal with that, then I 100% agree. Then I don't think that's that probably is the wrong profession for them. But discouragement, I think, we all feel on the
Yes.
daily
Yes.
sometimes. But pushing through it, being the people who are able to push through it are the people who will succeed, in my opinion.
I think what I meant was if you're only in it to be rich and famous, then it's not for
Right.
you.
Okay, I got you. Yeah, no,
That's definitely true.
100%. Yeah, because yeah, I would have given up a long time ago because I ain't rich and famous yet. I'll tell you that much.
Obviously, that's like on your mind, but that's not,
Yeah, I mean, it
that's like more of a perk. It might not even be a perk, it might be a nightmare. So
be a nice effect for sure. You back?
Okay. Yep.
Oh, sorry. We lost you there for like a solid 20 seconds.
It's fine. It's fine. I forgot where we were. Oh shoot. Lost you again. I'm gonna turn off my video and maybe that'll help. Just for a little bit.
Are you back?
You're back
dude,
though.
sick graphing.
Just for a little bit. Or whatever. We'll just we'll just risk it. Cool. So all right,
Sorry, your internet is not cooperating. Right.
I am so sorry, guys. I just turned off the video. Let's just see if that works better.
Okay, we
wait.
can hear you now. So
All right, perfect. So you guys ready to kind of go to the dark side of
Oh, going to the dark side already.
television and
Let's
film?
do it.
let's do it.
I'm so ready.
So did you read any of that essay or listen to any of that podcast I sent you?
Yes, I started listening to it. I didn't get around to the full thing, but it was some interesting thoughts about it. Is he gone again?
No, I'm here.
Oh, okay. Well, it was sorry. It was yes, I didn't get to all of it, full honesty. I was in a rush trying to set up this stuff here, but
Yeah, I wasn't.
But
I'm not concerned about it. I was just going to give a brief summary of the essay real quick.
yeah, let's hear it.
So
Go for it.
essentially, the guy's name's David Foster Wallace, and he was a fiction writer in the early 90s and I think part of the 80s. And he wrote an essay called E Unibus Plurum in the early 1990s, which it's an inversion of the United States motto E pluribus unum, which means out of many, one. So E unibus plurum means out of one, many. And his central theme is that televisual culture, or people watching television, the culture that exists within that, what it does is that it not only separates people, but it also, in a sense, kind of manipulates them. It manipulates them to buy things, and it manipulates them to think certain thoughts related to television. And it also creates a sort of echo chamber where everyone's watching television, and then these fiction writers are also watching television. And by watching television, they're watching television to almost survey it, and then they use the television that they see to model real life. And then by modeling real life through television, they then go and they write fiction, which doesn't actually look like real life. It just looks like television.
I mean, that's probably not wrong.
he's mainly critiquing people who watch television 6 hours a day.
Right.
Who are addicted to it, not people who just like watch it. Like obviously I watch a lot of television and I watch a lot of movies.
Right.
I love watching movies and I love watching television. I just want to know like your thoughts as far as how do you think television and film influence a culture? That's my main thought from that.
I mean, it's interesting. I mean, everything that you just said is, I mean, probably true
to an extent.
to what extent is the question? Yes. But I mean, I think that's all very interesting to think about as far as, it being this big echo chamber of if everyone is consuming the same thing. I mean, I feel like that argument falls apart a little bit to where, I mean, if you said this article was written in the 90s, right?
Yes.
And like now in the year of 2022, where there is just like more content than ever on more platforms than ever, people are watching like thousands of different shows, and versus
Yes.
like back in the 70s, there was only a handful of channels. Now there are so many different places to consume so many different things. And granted, there are some shows more popular than others. Like when Game of Thrones was coming out, everyone and their dog was watching it. But I mean, I feel like that's one thing to be said, is that is every single person sitting down and tuning into the same like radio program every day.
Yes.
Maybe not as much as like the 1960s, but yeah, I do think that is true to a certain extent. I mean, and there's a reason why people get so upset, for better or worse, about accurate depictions of people and groups in fiction, because certain people go like, on one side of the fence you have, oh, that doesn't matter at all, that's just a movie. But then other people go like, look around on how influential movies are. You put a stereotype of a certain group of people in a movie, and that stereotype bleeds into people's perception in real life, because every time they consume a piece of media and a group is being portrayed in a certain way, people start to think, oh, maybe that is her, subconsciously or not. And so, I mean, I think that media in that regard is a dangerous thing, but also a really great thing.
Powerful thing.
From the standpoint of, I mean, if you take like just a random super popular franchise like Star Wars, I mean, that teaches us that like it's good to stand up against impossible odds, even if you're, because it's the right thing to do, teaching us to stand up for justice and peace and to defeat the bad guys who are basically space Nazis. Like there are these like huge themes that are told over and over again throughout every major franchise right now, that like, oftentimes, evil doesn't pay and love conquers all, which is really cheesy, but a repeated theme again and again that I hope bleeds into society, because we're consuming movies about that very topic all the time.
Absolutely.
So those are my initial thoughts all over the place. But what are your thoughts, Ryan?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I feel like you just kind of laid it all out there on the table. But that is something that we talk about often. I have a film minor here in college, and so we often talk about the portrayal of different social groups through media. And often it's like talking about misrepresentation or poor representation, and how problematic that is. And so we're still working on it, but like race and gender are like really big subjects in that area. And I really do think that film, just like, I don't know, it definitely affects your perceptions of people in the real world, outside of watching a movie.
Yes.
And I think that problematic portrayals of certain groups is problematic, for lack of a better word. And that's something that we're seeing, that we're doing better at, I think. And there's still more progress to go. But in the last 10 years, for the first times ever, we're seeing like romantic comedies of, non-heterosexual relationships. We're seeing interracial couples. We've never seen that before. We're seeing more representation of people of color on screen, and I think that that's fantastic. And like that's so much better it helps combat poor representations, misrepresentations, and finally, giving a platform and a space to show all the talent and the beauty, and the humanity of all of those different social groups. And we've still got so much more to go. But yeah, I think those things really do play a role in how we view the world outside of the theater.
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic response. And like obviously the essay itself, it's not attacking TV, it's just criticizing it, right?
Sure.
And this kind of relates to all types of fiction. Fiction in and of itself, it paints a different view of the world, and it always has a message, whether or not they intend for there to be a message or not, right?
Yeah.
And when he's saying out of one many, he's saying like out of one television, right? Many different people. And the thing with television that he also mentions is that it generally doesn't represent reality, but is that really a bad thing? Sorry, I was lost
Hello?
there. Yeah, I was lost there.
Sorry, you cut out there for a good 15 seconds.
Yeah, I
Sorry.
was just gonna say, is it really, because his argument is that television doesn't represent reality, and that's quote unquote a bad thing. But is that really a bad thing? I mean, doesn't need to represent reality at all. I mean, it's fiction, right?
Right.
I think I was gonna jump in and say, like, I think when we watch a movie, we know that it's obviously fiction and that this
Yes.
is all actors on screen. But the reason why we enjoy these movies and why we come to watch them is because we identify with the characters.
Yeah.
We find things that are relatable, that we understand, conflicts and struggles that we have gone through ourselves. And so I think that it would be somewhat ignorant to say that audiences watch movies and disregard all of it as being fiction, because I mean, at the
Exactly.
end of the day, like, I cried when I watched Spider-Man Far From Home.
Dude, me
that was
too.
touching, because, like, I identify with those characters, and
Yeah.
sometimes I envy them. I want to be them. I understand what they're going through. And so, yeah, I think that, all narratives and why we make film is to showcase the, to showcase humanity and state a message again, back to talking about themes,
Yeah, no, I love that. I think the topic of whether or not a movie or a TV show or an art form of any kind it doesn't have value just because it like isn't an accurate depiction of reality is an interesting concept, because I think it depends on the piece. But as a general rule, I mean, if you were to take, and I've heard this example before and I love this analogy, if you were to take like painting, like, painting, a less popular art form now. Not everyone is walking around talking about paintings, but as much as like the Renaissance. But we still have, that's a bad example because we still have tons of illustrated artwork all the time.
Wait, could I cut in here for a second?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I think I explained that bad. I think what I meant was, do you think it's bad that TV can give people a distorted view of reality?
Right. Right. I mean, it depends. So, I mean, when it comes to reality, like if you were to take like going back to the painting example, if this makes sense. Like if you were to take an iconic piece from what's it, Starry Night. If you were to take the painting Starry Night, we all know that one. That's what that's blue with the squiggly lines and stuff like that, right? It does not look like real life. It looks far from it. When you look out at the night sky, it does not resemble an accurate depiction of reality. However, it still is doing what art is supposed to do. It's making you feel something. It is maybe not eliciting a realistic vibe, but it is eliciting some sort of emotion associated with maybe something you felt when you did look at the night sky. And then you can take a picture of those like super photo accurate drawings of a painting that like looks like real life, and that's super awesome too. But which is better than the other, the Starry Night style or the photorealistic style? Neither, because it's art, and which one makes you feel something, that's the better one. So when people talk in movies, do they oftentimes have a bunch of like random incoherent sentences that don't actually pan out to anything like I do all the time and probably have on this podcast? No. They don't do that in movies because a screenwriter is writing their words for them and no word wasted. Is that realistic? Not really per se. But this is supposed to make you feel something. It's a symbol for whatever this conversation in this movie is trying to say.
Are you familiar with Carl Jung?
Yeah, vaguely.
So he wrote this essay. It's called, I think it's called Dreams and Their Interpretations or something like that. And his theory is that when we dream, there's these certain archetypes that are involved. There's these themes in our dreams, like dreams are conveying a message. And taking that thought, and then when I think about a movie, movies are shot in scenes, right? And when I remember something, I remember something generally in scenes. I don't remember it the whole thing through, like it's some continuous stream. I remember it in scenes. This happened and this happened. He said that, he said this, and then jump to we were in my car, and boom, we were back home. My memory happens in scenes. Do you think, in a sense, movies are so relatable because they kind of they go along exactly almost as we remember and imagine things?
Interesting.
Or do you agree that that's even a thing? How do you think movies relate to our memory is what I'm saying, and the way that we
I
perceive
see what you're
things.
saying. From the standpoint of like, if I were to think back on something that happened to me, my brain is in a way editing out some of the extraneous details and the fluff that happened. And I'm just remembering the main bullet points in a way, the same way like a movie is depicted. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yes.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. I hadn't really thought of that comparison, but that sounds like there's a lot of validity in that. Because if I think back on an important exchange I had a week ago, I'm thinking about like the main important sentences said by each party and like the rough beginning, middle, and end. And I've probably forgotten by this point about like the random tangent that one person went on that wasn't important because I don't need to, my brain deleted it.
This is kind of wild. So this is very interesting. Now, Caden, think about that memory. And when you think about that memory, how do you picture it in your mind? Do you see it from your GoPro perspective?
First person is the word you're looking for.
That's right. Or are you seeing it like you would shoot a film, a third person? And like when I think of memories, I honestly see it like cutting from like a medium shot to a medium shot of me to like maybe establishing shot of both of us. Like that's what I'm visualizing in my head when I think of a memory.
Yeah, I honestly too feel like I recall memories in a vague third person most of the time.
Yeah, so I think that goes to Greg's perspective and what he's saying, or his ideology. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, that's interesting. I hadn't really thought about that before. Yeah, are we understanding what you're saying, right? Or you're like, what are you guys talking about?
No, you are understanding what I'm saying. It's like our movies, kind of us just putting our imagination on the screen, basically.
Yeah, no, I think that is
in like a really more literal sense than just like you created something, or like you're literally putting it on as you would imagine it in a sense.
Yeah, no, and there's a famous quote from a writer out there. I forget who, and I'm gonna misquote it as well. Hopefully this is helpful. It says like the difference between reality and fiction is fiction has to make sense. If you're gonna sit down and you're gonna craft a story, like in order for it to be worth the audience's time, there has to be some sort of question posed or answer given, and some form of logic behind it. Versus reality, you can spend an entire day with like a random event happen to you for no apparent reason. There was no buildup, there was no payoff, and you're like, well, that was weird, and that's it. And that you don't want to you don't want to make a movie about that. Most of the time anyway. There are exceptions. But reality has to have or doesn't have to make sense to anyone versus fiction does. At least fiction that people want to watch for the most part. And there are, of course, are always exceptions. But fiction has to have
Inception.
yeah, I mean, Inception is also one of my favorite movies. But
Have you seen Mr.
Yeah.
Nobody?
Oh yeah, Mr. Nobody's great. I love Mr. Nobody.
Yeah, an even more confusing movie, but it's better for me.
Yeah, no, that movie's all about choice. That's the central theme of that one. And I love it. It's really good.
So as far as, do you consider yourself at all a philosopher in a sense when you're making a movie?
I mean, that's a good question. I mean, would I say that out loud to anyone? Probably not. But I mean,
Well, I'm going to save you before you sound condescending. I was going to say, I don't think so. What I consider myself to be, what I'd consider Caden to be, what I consider any writer to be, is a human being with lived experiences.
Okay.
And I would say that those experiences are what frame me to write a story, or to make a theme, or even somebody else's experiences, like a close friend or maybe a girlfriend who's like shared personal details in their life, and that you want to like, share that story with some other world, but in a different form. So I guess you could say that we're philosophers, but I think that we're just like human beings who are self-analytical and understand, I don't know, like, what we care about or what we've struggled through and what we want other people to like, find shared experiences with from us.
Right. I would prefer the word hero personally. I would consider us heroes probably. No, I mean, I agree with Rylan. I think in a weird way, anytime you write fiction, whether you want to or not, I think you're kind of telling the audience how you think the best way to live is. In a strange way, you're taking like you're taking a situation and you're framing it in a way where you say, this is how you should deal with this situation, or this is how you shouldn't deal with this situation. And it's kind of like your viewpoint on life. And if you really like look at some people's works, you can, I think, see what, in theory, if they were a good writer or a bad writer, you can see what they value through their work. I watch James Gunn's work and I can tell that he really values family and positive connections with people. You look at Michael Bay and you can tell he values trucks
Robots
and boobs. Yeah.
I think that's a really good way of putting it though. Yeah, I think you're totally right. And I think that's why, certain directors have certain types of films and stories that they tell. And there's like the concept of an auteur. Have we heard that concept before?
I have not. Can you explain
This is
it?
like a something you eat.
This is like a no. So this is a film theory. So there's authorship and then there's auteurship, if I'm pronouncing that correctly.
Okay.
An auteur is essentially a person who has such a distinctive style that all of their works resemble them. And so auteurism is basically that concept that is saying that it exists. So like an example of auteurs would be like Wes Anderson, Martin Scorsese, Quentin Tarantino. Like once, like when you watch their films, you immediately know like, oh, like I can tell because of maybe the visual style that's going on the screen, like the shot composition, maybe the coloring, the costuming, but then also like thematic material that's going on. And so those are like filmmaker auteurs. And so again, like your lived experiences totally influences the stuff you write about. And so like Martin Scorsese is a great example, who is an auteur. And like, if you look at most of his works, he features characters that like don't they go through like negative change arcs and
Like they're
become
irredeemable in a lot of ways.
absolutely, like they get worse as the movie goes on, and like they maybe learn something, but like I mean, let's see, like where do we want to start? Like we
Joker.
could, the Joker, that was not by Martin Scorsese, although he did produce the movie. But
Sorry,
the
that was more
Joker,
of just an example of a
oh yeah,
character
Yeah,
that
that's a
went
perfect example of
Right.
negative.
and that's a perfect example, where society treats this character so poorly
Yeah.
that he regresses
Descends
into
Or was it a positive
insanity.
change?
For his
That's a good
perspective, it
question.
was because he
Mhm.
found place and purpose in his life. But yeah, that was the idea of auteurism, and like I think that it reflects the idea that people make stories based on what's important to them, and what they think and how you should live your life should be.
Right.
Yeah, and I just want to say something here is that I don't think it's necessarily that they're basing it off of lived experiences, but perhaps more so a mix between lived experiences and the thoughts and imaginations that they've had throughout their life.
Yeah. Also
I
true.
totally agree. Yeah, it doesn't. Yeah, because like Martin Scorsese, he didn't necessarily go through all the drug addiction that our friend did in Wolf of Wall Street. But like, that's a story he wanted to tell. He tells the stories that fascinate him and not aren't always, the ones that he's experienced. So you're definitely right.
Who directed Fight Club?
David Fincher, my boy, David Fincher.
What else has he directed?
He is one of my favorite directors. He's directed Seven, The Social Network, Zodiac.
Wow.
Man, this is a quiz I wasn't ready for. Let me think what else. The girl with the dragon tattoo. The Netflix series Mindhunter. Trying to think off the top of my head. There's someone watching this who's his actual biggest fan. He's going, "You idiot, you're forgetting their best movies." But yeah, he's a great director. He's great. He's wonderful. I like him. Good guy. Haven't met him, but I like his work.
So as far as philosophy in film goes, people, directors, writers portraying messages in film, who are some of the people who have been the most impactful to the two of you, or maybe not the most impactful, but their message kind of like the movie really hit you hard?
Right. I'll let you go first, Ron.
Oh, thank you. I mean, there's a lot of good ones for sure. The one that comes to mind is the film About Time.
Good movie.
Which is an excellent movie. Have you heard of it, Greg?
Is that the one where there's a family line and he inherits the ability to time travel?
That's the one.
Yeah, that's the one. So yeah, it's a romantic comedy where like the male love interest discovers that he can time travel. And basically throughout the film, has it loves the ability to time travel, but also learns that like because of the butterfly effect, essentially, that it creates problems. And at the very end of the movie, he essentially learns that like the best way to live life is not necessarily to go back in time, but to enjoy the present. And so I thought it was like a really impactful message. And like literally a guy who has the ability to time travel, which we all think is like beautiful, basically tells us that like, no, you shouldn't time travel. In fact, the best gift is the gift that you already have, which is living in the present. And I was
that's
like,
why it's called The Present.
yeah,
Absolutely.
oh yeah.
Gift.
And so that is like, I think that is just such a beautiful theme, and it like literally changed the way I live my life. Like I think
Wow.
about it all the time. Like I walk around and just try to enjoy the present so much. And they did such a beautiful job too. And it's like he's experiencing tough things that are going on, but he's still like enjoying that part of it too, and learning how to enjoy the struggles and the difficulties of life. and also know that you're going to be able to get out of it. It's a very similar theme also to the movie Soul, I think. It just
Okay, I haven't seen
in
that one yet.
Oh, well, I don't want to spoil it. But
It's
it
okay.
has a
I already heard the explanation on a podcast, so
yeah,
it's
it's
okay if you spoil it.
yeah, it's a very similar theme of basically a guy who wants to become a famous jazz pianist. And then once he becomes the jazz pianist, he or you know, the goal, he once he reached his goal, he realized it wasn't as amazing as he thought it was going to be. And then realized that like he was so focused on the future that he didn't realize all the amazing stuff he already had, and living in the present. So very similar theme, and I just love that message, and I think it's super important. And like I try to remind myself every day to like live in the present, which is like not a hot take, but like I think it was really impactful in the stories of About Time and Soul.
And do you think that's something that you achieve when you're working on film, working on things that you love?
Absolutely. Yeah, like I realize that like most of the life that you live is spent working. And whenever you have conversations with people, I often find people will be like, I had to work today. I have so much homework if you're in, you know, college, or just like, oh, work was rough. And I find myself saying the same things. But like if I do like the numbers, I spend like 80% of my life working. And if I'm not enjoying that work, then I'm not enjoying most of my life. So
Exactly.
like I just need to like, you know, be less focused on like when I finish the work, then I'll feel good, but like enjoy what I'm doing, you know, because that's what life is about. You're always working. And if you can't enjoy work, then you can't enjoy life. That's what I say.
100%. 100%.
What about you, Caden?
Mm.
Movie changed your life theme?
So I mean, I have a couple. I have 12. I'm gonna get through them all. Okay. So
Okay.
uh I mean, I say the film work of Damien Chazelle. I think I'm pronouncing his name right. He's a director who, kind of going off of the subject we just talked about, kind of tells the same story over and over again, but in different ways, and exploring a different part of it each time. He is the guy who directed La La Land and Whiplash and the movie First Man. So basically, for people unfamiliar with the works, each movie in a way it explores the question of like what is the cost of greatness, essentially. Like in Whiplash, we have a guy who's trying to become a jazz drummer, but he kind of becomes a dick doing so, and he finally succeeds in his goal. But he basically pushes everyone out of his life and treats his girlfriend like garbage, and but he succeeds in the end. And then it kind of poses the question, like, was that worth it? And then in La La Land, similar thing, where we have Ryan Gosling is trying to open up this jazz club and become a famous jazz musician, and then he has Emma Stone, his girlfriend, is trying to become a famous actress. And spoiler alert, they both end up succeeding, but they lose their relationship together. And he doesn't, each time in his movie, he doesn't tell you what the right answer is, but he just kind of highlights, if you live your whole life super goal oriented, and you're just concerned about that shiny accomplishment, whether it's pertaining to career or whatever, and you're not putting maybe like connections and personal connection and kindness first, maybe that isn't always a good thing. Or is it? I don't know. He poses that question in a different way every time. And I think he does it beautifully, because each time his character sets out with a goal and he or she actually succeeds in said goal. But then you look at what they left behind, and he asks you, like, should he or she have played his cards differently or not? And so, I mean, I don't have the answer for that, but it definitely makes me movies like that make me question, like, okay, so I'm really really trying to, make it big in this film scene here, so much so that I might be rude to someone else as a competitor in order to succeed. Maybe not. Maybe that's a step too far, or maybe nice guys finish last, that age old question. um but as a general rule, I'd like to think, maybe personal connection and kindness should be ahead of just stomping on people to get to your dreams. And those
Nah.
movies, yeah, I mean, it depends on who you talk to, but I think those movies highlight that question really, really well.
So it's kind of like that song Rocket Man.
Yeah.
You know,
Now you've made it, and now you're all up here alone. Exactly.
yes.
Oh
Yes,
man.
that's a great thing.
You can't raise
Finally,
no kids on Mars. It's too cold.
and that's funny. That's exactly what Damien Chazelle's third movie, First Man, is about. Ryan Gosling plays. I'm gonna be sorry. You gotta cut this because I forgot the guy's name. The first guy on the moon, Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong. Thank you. Sorry, you gotta cut that so I look like I was really.
I'm pretty
smart.
sure it was Louis Armstrong. But
Yeah, Louis Armstrong, first guy on the moon. But yeah, he finally, and this movie I haven't seen this many times, but succeeds, and he makes it to the moon, which is a huge accomplishment, not just for man, but for mankind. But he also, in order to do that, kind of had to, spend too much time away from his family and his wife and build up resentment toward other people. And like, what's the cost of greatness? That's the question in all three of his movies. And it's a good question I think people should ask themselves all the time, whether it's in their creative pursuits or their business pursuits or just pursuits in general. I'm going to say pursuits one more time.
Well, with great power comes great responsibility, right? With
absolutely, yes,
and obviously that's straight from Spider-Man, but it's 100% true.
Absolutely.
And as what I was trying to get at earlier with David Foster Wallace and his essay is that TV and film and just televisual culture in general, entertainment, media, our smartphones, all these things have a lot of influence on people. People watch TV constantly, right? They're consuming a lot of media. And as creators in the film industry, you guys have the potential to have a lot of power, because film has a lot of power. It's very compelling. And with great power comes great responsibility. And I don't know if you've ever thought of that, like thought about how you actually have a lot more power than you think as far as how you can influence other people.
Right. No, that's a very good point. And it's something that I think about a lot. Again, I've been taking these classes down here in college that talk about poor representation and misrepresentation.
Yeah.
And Kate and I, we haven't like made it big or anything. The dream is to share our product with as many people as we can.
Absolutely.
And so we would hope to get big. That'd be awesome. But I think it's very important to be mindful of the position, if ever, that we would hold. And like, I would very much want to tell important stories and make sure that I'm representing people well. Because that gives us a very unique position to share messages across the world. Like, think about, I'm thinking about like Disney, and obviously I don't think we'll ever get to Disney level, but like Disney is just such influence. And like, it's just like, the messages they tell or the people they show on screen. They just get to communicate across all different ages. And I think that that's something that we have to be very mindful of and make sure that we are fairly representing, all different types of people. and not doing a disservice to different
Yeah.
populations.
Well, yeah, and it's not just that, but you have the potential to make millions of people laugh. You have the potential to make millions of people cry. You have the potential to make millions of people perhaps even angry. And that's the cool, I think, in a sense, creators, people who write books, people who make movies, or people who tell stories to vast audiences, they're really like, a lot of times it could be playing with fire, and sometimes this fire can be a very beautiful thing, and sometimes it can also be an ugly thing. And as far as crafting something beautiful that really like changes the lives of people, like that movie About Time, I think that's a really magical thing that you guys have the potential of doing.
I'd
Yeah.
hope so.
No, I agree. I
Um,
think that just keeping that in mind when making anything, and of course there's always a place for movies, just like straight up goofball movies that are there to just to entertain, and then
Absolutely.
but I think it's just too preachy, as they say. Like some people, if you pull it off incorrectly and you're writing something and then it gets to the viewer and it feels like there is this big agenda to tell you like
Yeah.
exactly how to feel, and it's coming off super heavy handed. No one wants that. I think we can all agree that like if you're watching something to be entertained and then it is just hitting you over the head with some like really strong opinion that you're like, oh, what is this doing in here?
Yeah, like it's just too obvious.
Yeah, there's definitely a wrong way to do it too. But I think if you just craft your stories with truth, and it means something to you, and it's truthful to you, and you can do it in a subtle ish way, I think it just about any narrative can benefit from something like that.
Yeah, 100%.
Greg, I was going to ask you a question. We
Go
haven't
for it.
heard a movie that gave you any ideological shifts or brightened
Okay.
your mind. So I was curious to know,
Okay.
Was there a movie that drastically changed your perception of the world?
Mall Cop 2?
So to that so to that question, I'm not sure. But as far as movies that, I'm gonna go with a TV show, actually.
Sure.
It's called Avatar: The Last Airbender. I'm sure
One of the
you've
best
seen it.
shows. One of the
I'm sure
best
you've seen
shows
it.
ever.
Dude, such a good show. Yeah,
It-
we've both watched it too many times.
Yeah.
The philosophy in that show is so intense. There's so many life lessons to be learned from that show. It is crazy. Like every single
Yeah.
episode has a message, right? And
Absolutely.
there's also the thing that I love most about it is that at the very end, the very last episode, Aang does not want to kill.
Oh, spoiler alert.
Oh yeah, okay. If you haven't seen it by now,
15-year-old
like,
show, yeah.
Oh, it's a great show. Not everyone's seen it. They need to.
It's true.
So, spoiler alert! Spoiler alert! At the very end, both of you know what happened. Aang doesn't want to kill the Fire Lord, right? So instead of killing the Fire Lord, he takes away his powers. But how does he take away his power? He takes away his power by being so firm within his own belief, within his own willpower, that he is able to take away his willpower, right?
Yeah.
And that is so powerful. It's like Aang will do whatever it takes to do the right thing, no matter what. And that is how powerful he is. He will not give up. He will not not do the right thing. And that
Right.
is a very powerful thing. If you stay firm in what you love, and you hold on to what you love and you keep going for what you love no matter what, you have the power to take away great power from other people. And that's crazy.
Right. Yeah. Just a strong will can be enough of a like a strong defense is a good offense. You have enough of a strong will in what you believe, and eventually that will outwill the next.
Well, it's in a sense he's power isn't burning everyone down and killing them. Power is being ultimately a really good person that you feel powerless towards because of all their because of how good they are, in a sense, if that makes any sense.
Right. Yeah, no, absolutely.
And that's really the show that kind of really got me thinking. But there's also the movie Mr. Nobody that I mentioned earlier, which didn't really get me thinking that much, but it obviously got me thinking, but I could relate to it a lot.
Yeah, that movie is excellent too. Just showing you the just choice, and it's been a while, but that whole movie being about choice and consequences behind every decision you make. But at the end of the day, like, you have to make one. You can't sit around your whole life contemplating every decision you could make. Eventually you have to choose one, and because all of life is going to have its ups and its downs. You're going to feel love and you're going to feel pain, but you have to choose one path, and it's not going to be perfect.
Yeah.
But that's what life is. At least that's, to my knowledge, to the best of my recollection, what Mr. Nobody was about.
Yeah. Rylan, do you have any commentary?
Yeah, I saw it once a while ago, so I don't really have anything to say about Mr. Nobody.
It's a good movie.
But Avatar, I'm pretty sure I'm gonna get a tattoo of something Avatar related on my body. That's how much I like that show.
He's been telling me earlier before we started, he wants to get Momo and Appa on each nip.
This is not true. But I was thinking about maybe getting the air symbol tattoo on my shoulder or something. Just because,
he's very gassy.
I just I love all of what the air nomads stand for and their philosophy. Avatar is a great show. Everyone needs to watch that show.
Yes, I agree.
Well, it's also each element represents a philosophy, in a sense, or
right.
It represents a state. Like air represents freedom, fire represents life, water represents nurturing, and then earth represents strength, right? So I think as far as Aang kind of combining all of those things together, it's really beautiful. Like life, a life doesn't need to be a destructive force, right? Fire doesn't need to be destructive. It can be tamed, and it's tamed by water, earth, and air.
Yeah, that whole show goes into balance and finding internal balance and inner peace, and there's so many good analogies. Good. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, it kind of goes back to what Rylan, what you were saying about being in the present moment. And I think it's as far as being a creator, do you ever find yourself, or you, Caden, do you ever find yourselves in a flow state?
What do you mean by that?
A flow state is when you're kind of in a trance while you're creating stuff. Like while you're filming, you're only focused on filming, and everything else is completely out of your mind.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
So, all the time for me.
Oh, so you're saying kind of like you are so into, like, you're in a moment when, like, for me it'd be playing music, and like I basically get lost in the music and captivated, and like the world around me kind of goes away. Is that kind of what you're talking about? Oh yeah, it is something that I experience. And it is so hard to describe. And going back to the movie Soul, that was something that they actually tried to depict the protagonist and the jazz pianist. Whenever he plays, they kind of did a thing where he's playing the piano, even with a group of musicians, and then visually what happens is like all the people fade away around him, and like basically a bunch of blue and purple colors swarm around him and musical
Wow.
notes. And it was a really pretty way of visualizing that concept. And it's honestly so accurate. Like, I don't know how to describe it, but like sometimes when I'm playing or improvising, like the world around me, it sounds so dramatic, but it like goes away. Like people will ask me questions and I like literally can't even hear what they're saying. Sometimes I use that as an excuse to ignore Caden, but like I really can't. Like it's so weird. I can't describe it. It's like I feel like I know where my finger, like I'm not even moving. It's like happening habitually and involuntarily. My fingers are moving just like within the void of space. It's weird. It's a beautiful feeling.
Like, Caden, I'm in the flow state right now. Don't interrupt me.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
how does that work? I feel like music isn't as easy to understand that concept but I'm curious to know how that would apply to filmmaking. So how have you experienced this, Caden?
I mean, for me, it's oftentimes when I am behind a camera and we're on set in the thick of it and we're filming, like a part of my brain just kind of turns off, and this just sounds maybe dumb, but the camera becomes part of me and I'm part of the camera, and I am in that world for a second, and nothing else matters, so much so that it's a little dangerous. There's been times where if I'm filming a shot and I'm like hanging out the back of a car, suddenly my brain just turns off and the only thing that matters is getting this shot. And then I'm like dangling out of a moving car, and then my buddy goes like, "What the hell are you doing?" I'm like, "Oh, right, sorry, this is real life." But like I can legit, you put a camera in my hand and tell me to capture something, I will like walk through a burning building to get a shot, which is like the only time I would ever do anything remotely dangerous, because I'm kind of a wimp in every other part of my life. Like I don't even like roller coasters, but if I had to get on a roller coaster to get a shot, I'd be like, yeah, which seat is the best seat and what lens should I get? Suddenly it just doesn't even matter what I'm doing. It's weird and maybe dangerous. This is probably how I'm gonna die. Please tag this podcast, so when you see my body mysteriously in a field somewhere, you can pull this up for evidence.
Well, we're gonna see the movie though.
Yes, hopefully. Yeah, hopefully the shot I got was good, and you captured my final moments, put it in the bloopers. People eat that up,
Greg, I know you do writing and narrative storytelling. That's redundant. I know you do narrative work. Is this something you experience too?
Oh, absolutely.
Tell me about it.
Not during a podcast, but because we're all talking, and well, you could get lost in conversation though sometimes, for sure.
Right.
Like definitely. Like I've definitely been lost in conversations before where I just get on this flow state. It's a rare thing,
mm-hmm.
but when you're but when I'm writing, yeah, I get that flow state all the time. It's a very, I mean, it's the best feeling in the world, really. It's like you get kind of lost in your creation, and well, you kind of become you kind of like merge yourself with it in a sense. I think you become the story that you're writing in a sense. Or like it, in your case, Rylan, you become the music, or Caden, I think you kind of become the film.
Yeah, I feel that.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like you're merging yourself with it in a sense. I know that sounds cheesy, but I mean, that's what it feels like. If we could describe it. And
right.
I think,
yeah, it's interesting.
I think as artists, when we're creating something in a flow state, um, we're we're kind of also gifting the audience with that flow state too, because they can see the work that we made during that flow state, and they might get tranced as well within it.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
No, yeah, film is definitely, intended to transport someone somewhere else. And I think that's part of like really good audience identification is when you're essentially watching the story through someone else's shoes, you know? And I think that's like, why we cry when we see like someone else crying on film. Is because we've almost become that character for a second. Whatever they experience, we are experiencing with them as them. So it definitely has that transportive effect.
So it's almost, in a sense, sometimes it can be sort of an empathic sort of
Yeah.
thing.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah, I feel like
yeah.
if you're feeling a strong emotion while making the piece, whatever it may be, I think there's a higher likelihood for the audience or the listener or whoever to feel reciprocate said feeling.
So I wanted to touch, before we go, on there's this one point in David Foster Wallace's essay where he talks about it. It's in the section titled Act Natural. And he's talking about how not many people are fit to stand the gaze of a lot of people, which he quotes Emerson there, that not many people can act natural on camera, right? Like, when you're getting filmed, most normal people stutter, they get all nervous, oh, shoot them on camera. But actors and actresses, they kind of just look so real. It's their job to make it like kind of pull you into the illusion in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
And have you ever worked and with someone who really kind of was feeling, just really convince you that they are the character that you wrote?
Right. That's a good question. I mean, every actor, and I've worked with a handful, and I hopefully a lot more to come, but every actor has a different process, and not everyone is right or wrong. I'm sure some are wrong. If you're having to kill 3 people before you get into the role, that's probably wrong. But everyone has a variety of different ways to get into character. Most of the actors I work with aren't necessarily like the Daniel Day-Lewis like method actors where they have to sit in the character's shoes for 3 months before they can even think for a second about saying a line as the character. Fortunately, that isn't haven't been it with any actors like that, and I think most people prefer not to work with people like that. If kind of what I've gathered, not discounting the super talented Daniel Day-Lewis. There's definitely merit to those to the method actors like that. But I think it is the director's dream to have an actor who can step in and out of the character's shoes as quick as possible, which of course is definitely, they're not robots. They don't have necessarily oh, you want me to just turn this switch and then suddenly they start crying. Some do, but you still have to treat them like people. But to answer your question, like, as there's been a handful of times where like we're doing a long take and I'm behind the monitor, sometimes just watching in person, an actor like pour their soul out, and suddenly I've forgotten that this is like, Steven, the friend I know. Suddenly I'm watching the character and I've forgotten that this isn't a real circumstance, one that I wrote and made up in my head. Suddenly this is real, and really good actors can do that. And then of course you yell cut And they go, okay, so how was that? And then you're like, oh, right. Damn, this guy's good.
Wow. So
yeah, there's been a handful of moments.
they almost hypnotize you.
Yeah, it
in a
really is.
sense.
Like they bring you in a trance. And again, every person has their different process, and I try to respect all of them. And I'm sure there's going to be an actor I work with, next week who has a process I've never dealt with before. And I'm up for the challenge.
Yeah, I was gonna jump in here too and say it's always weird when you're meeting actors for like the first time, and then watching them do their performances, because then it gets really confusing. And I was like this on set with on one of Caden's films, for the zombie western, and the lead for the film, his name is Falk, and I had barely known the guy, barely met the guy, and his name is Wyatt in the short. And so like I kept accidentally wanting to call him Wyatt, and then also his performances, like I was watching him act, and so for the longest time I always thought like him as a person was like a really bouncy, energetic character, but like that's not him at all. And so like it's really weird when you meet actors for like the first time and like don't know them really well, because then like it confuses your perception of who they are. It's also interesting too, because like I feel like this is something that I hear a lot of celebrities and internet what's the word?
Personalities.
Yeah, internet personalities and characters or and actors talk about, is the idea that like fan bases and fans feel like they know and understand who like a person is by their performances, or on a show, or their internet personality, when they just like have no, I don't know, real concept. And so like an example too is like the show It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. That show's been running for how long?
I feel like 15 years.
Yeah, something like 15 years. And so like watches a show with I haven't seen all of it, but so far it's great. But if everyone watches that show and like for 15 years sees Charlie Day as like this, basically his character is kind of ignorant and disrespectful, and it changes throughout the show. But like if you watch a character for 15 years, that's totally gonna like affect your like how you think that actor is a real person, and it can like be problematic, or it could also be a good thing.
Well, but do you think playing a part for 15 years can change your personality?
That's an interesting question.
I feel like it's got to at a certain point. Like if you've been playing the same like super like loud, energetic guy for 15 years and that's been your day job, I feel like you are slowly going to get more loud and energetic. That would be my guess. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I am not an actor. I have acted on camera out of necessity a handful of times, but I would guess that if every day I had to go into work, it'd be, oh wow, extra Charlie Day-ish, I feel like I would probably inherit a lot of those attributes in my day-to-day.
That's an interesting question for an actor. I would love to know what they say. I know that like there's been a couple, I've done like one show in my life, like a musical theater show. I did Cinderella in high school, which I'm sure was terrible if I go back and watch it now.
It was great.
But
yeah,
come on, Riley. For like the 3 months that we were rehearsing and did the show, I remember outside of the show being like extra bouncy and animated as a person, and like hating how I was like so it definitely did like change who I was for that time. And then like a week later after the show was done, I was back to like my normal self, but I was definitely like an elevated like version of myself outside of that show while I was rehearsing.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, if say I'm writing a book for over a year and my book is about certain concepts, I'm going to be thinking about those concepts quite a bit.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, it's kind of like a weird analogy, but if you start like shopping or looking around shopping for a car and you have like a type of car in particular that you want, and then suddenly you start seeing that same exact car everywhere around town now, because you've kind of like changed like you've brought attention to something and
Nice.
your mind's eye, and suddenly it sticks out everywhere. Like, you know, that whole, like, you know, when you hurt your foot and then suddenly it's like, oh, of all the days, today's the time where I hit my foot on 4 different things. What are the odds? Well, chances are you actually would have hit your foot those 4 places all the time. You just noticed it like way more now. I don't know
Yeah.
if that's if that analogy makes sense, but yeah, you start
Yeah,
to
being an actor
bring,
is like being a
yeah.
foot.
Yes, that's exactly what I was trying to say. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
So, and the two of you, you know, you're making films, you're making movies. In a sense, you're drawing people's attention to certain things.
Yeah. Exactly. Yes. Yeah. Bringing that concepts and kind of changing your perception a little bit, putting a different lens on it. That the next time you encounter something similar or reminds you of that, you've like created a pathway that makes you think of whatever we're talking about. Yeah. Exactly. Like a foot.
Yeah. I think one last thing is that um, the film industry, you're working with multiple art forms at a time. You're writing the story, you're working on cinematography, the sound effects, the visual
Mhm.
effects. You've got the actors themselves, right? You have all these things interacting, all these art forms interacting.
Mhm.
And what's the biggest challenge you've had with that?
Oh, I mean, that's a good question. I mean, it's kind of this all encompassing, like auditory, visual, um, all the above kind of have to marriage together and form this grand vision. And it, you know, doesn't always. I
Yeah.
mean, I feel like the main thing is like knowing with confidence what you want and what you're trying to achieve, but at the same time, on the other spectrum, being able to lean into other people's expertise. And it's definitely a teeter totter of when are you like sacrificing your vision just to please other people. But like you're bringing these in theory professionals on in their craft, and you want to listen to them. Like, I'm not going to tell like Rylan like how to write a like piano solo, even though I might run one random day have a really good specific idea for one. I have to kind of trust that Rylan is going to write a better one than me and let him go at it. And same with like building a set, same with setting up a shot, you know, within reason, as long as I know what I want, but also making the person that is working underneath me in their department know that they feel valued and are allowed to do what they're going to do freely, I think is huge.
So you're probably a really good director then.
Well,
With as far as
thanks,
giving
Greg.
You
people,
would, yeah, you'd think so.
as far as giving people their autonomy, because I think one thing that Netflix, like the reason why Netflix is doing so well right now, is that with all their Netflix originals, they're really giving people the opportunity to create, being
Absolutely.
unhinged
Yes.
by wanting numbers or anything like that. So
Right. Absolutely. Like letting people do what you brought them there to do is huge. And again, is finding that line is tricky. There are times like you hear horror stories of like the studio came in and stepped on the director and ruined the film. And that happens legitimately, probably all the time. But there are other sides of the spectrum where you probably don't hear it as often, but the studio came in and totally saved a movie from sucking major balls because the director dropped the ball, or who knows what happened there. You know, believe it or not, sometimes the studio actually does know what's best, sometimes, not always. But there's it's a two-way street. And finding that healthy medium is what I try to do as much as possible.
cool. What do you think about that, Rylan?
Yeah, I think Caden does a good job. I
Oh, thanks.
No, I really
I've
am.
seen a passive aggressive comment coming.
I do think that Caden balances that well, his position well. And yeah, I think it's definitely tricky because like everything clearly has a stamp by Caden with his name on it.
Yes.
But at the same time, it's still allowing for those different departments to do what they love and what they know best. So it just like, Caden was describing how he directs me, he does the same type of direction towards different departments where like he doesn't specifically tell them how to do their craft, but like again, the word Caden was using was like that intention and explaining like what he wants to convey.
He points him in the right direction.
Right. And I think he does a marvelous job. I'm really impressed by that.
Well,
Especially
thanks.
I think he's been just like helping me so much and has been an excellent job at directing me for scoring music for the projects we've been doing. And I think the products have been pretty good. So, but he's doing a really good job with that.
Thanks, Ron. I mean, it's definitely a learning experience, and I know that I have a long ways to go, but I also learn from every person I work with too, whether it's learning how to do something or how not to do something, if it's a cautionary tale sometimes. But yeah, I mean, I learn a million things just working with Rylan, even though I technically on paper am steering the ship. I'm picking up new things from Rylan all the time too. As he's the expert in his field, and in theory I'm supposed to be in mine, and so it's a give and take both ways, and that's why it's so fun.
Awesome. Well, you guys have anything else you'd like to leave us with?
Let's talk about cryptocurrency for a second. So I think he's welcome back to the cryptocurrency podcast.
I just wanted to end saying that Cade and I are definitely both experts in our craft.
Mhm.
That period. That's all I want to say pretty much.
Yeah, we changed the world with pretty much everything we do.
I've never seen a better director or film composer.
Yeah, that's always the weird thing is talking about ourselves always feels like
I have so much to learn.
At the end of the day, we're both just trying to figure things out. We've so much farther to go as far as learning, but we're giving it our all and trying our hardest to make something fun and worthwhile. But we're all figuring things out, and we will continue to do so till the day we die.
Awesome. Where can people find you?
So where I post most of my content right now, mostly my short films and sketches, is my YouTube channel, which is just my first and last name, Caden Butera on YouTube. And we have a new sketch coming out next week, actually.
Right. Cool.
And then just my Instagram is also Caden Butera. All my handles are Caden Butera. And please follow and subscribe and do all that fun stuff. That'd be great. That'd be super cool.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast, guys.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thank you so much, Greg. It's a good time.
All right. Well, peace out, everyone.